Well, as the U.S. becomes more involved with the war in Ukraine, the White House is keen to show that it has not forgotten what it calls a foreign policy priority, the Indo-Pacific. A special summit of ASEAN member countries is due to be hosted by the U.S. in Washington tomorrow. Kate Fisher reports on the challenges ahead as the U.S. attempts to engage the region it describes as the most important for America's future.
As Russia's destruction in Ukraine enters its third month, the US has rallied the world to stand up to President Vladimir Putin with harsh sanctions and billions of dollars in aid and weapons for Ukraine.
The General Assembly.
But not all ASEAN members have come on board. Several, like Laos and Vietnam, have abstained rather than vote against Russia at the United Nations.
The Biden administration has been pretty good about showing some delicacy toward partners like Vietnam, who for pretty clear reasons can't really condemn the Russians. I mean, when you share a land border with China and Russia makes 85% of your military equipment, there are reasons that you're not going to want to upset Moscow too much. So there's a tightrope to walk here, but so far I think the White House has been pretty good at walking it, and I'd expect them to keep that up next week.
Another sticking point for the US in negotiating with ASEAN is its other regional alliances.
Smaller arrangements, minilaterals and all that, like the Quad, like AUKUS, have obviously given some concern to some capitals in Southeast Asia.
The Quad being the US's strategic security dialogue with Australia, India and Japan, and AUKUS, its trilateral security pact with Australia and the UK.
So there are all these proclamations of ASEAN centrality support, but then there is a preference that you allude to, Greg, of working with only certain partners on certain issues that risk leaving behind the rest of the ASEAN member states.
I think we have to acknowledge that this is a real tension now. And in some ways, it's a tension between going for more depth in terms of the coalitions we're trying to build in Asia, right? Working with the countries that are willing to do the most, the fastest, right? Japan, Australia, sometimes India, right? Sometimes the United Kingdom and others. Or do we try and broaden out that group of countries that we're working so closely with? And I think what we've seen is that actually broadening is really hard.
The decades of failed economic decisions.
There is also tension over the US's lack of a clear trade and economic agenda for the region.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership, another disaster.
In the wake of former President Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
It's enormously damaging both symbolically with our partners, because it shows a U.S. not prepared to engage in difficult discussions in order to assert leadership. It shows the U.S. not engaged in economic rulemaking. It reinforces fears that maybe the next administration will bring another retrenchment of U.S. interests. And so how can you expect small and medium-sized parties to stand firm against Chinese pressure if they're always worried that the U.S. isn't going to be there when they turn around?
Analysts say that's why the Biden administration is prioritizing this summit amid so many other policy pressures.
The summit will be a net positive. One of the most valuable commodities in Washington is the president's time. And the fact that he's taking the time to have a two-day summit, and that most of the senior leadership will as well, with ASEAN counterparts amid ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, shows that the White House understands that the Indo-Pacific remains a priority theater.
Yet so far, its engagement with the region has only partly lived up to what many there might have hoped for. With war in Europe, soaring inflation at home and a global pandemic, President Biden has plenty to distract him away from Southeast Asia. But holding this summit shows that for him, countering China is still a priority. Kate Fisher, CNA, Washington.